Jonathan Weinberg. Today I'm going to talk about a pen which I really don't like. Uh, so this is kind of negative review, I suppose. This is the Pelikan Jazz Elegance. It's an inexpensive pen. The positive thing I'm going to say is that it comes from a company that is one of my favorite pen companies because they make my favorite pen. This is the Pelikan M800, which is a fantastic writer. It's not a cheap pen. It's kind of one of the grail pens. It can run you, anywhere from $500 to $600, depending on the retail where you buy it. So it's a very expensive gold pen. I got it used in a great deal that was much less than that. But anyway, it's my favorite pen. And I thought, well, if Pelikan makes such a great pen on the high end, then maybe on the low end, their inexpensive pen might be really good. And actually, I have another vintage pen by Pelikan. This is the 120, which was actually kind of subcontracted by another company. Mertz, I think, is the name of the manufacturer. And this is a pen from the 70s, and this writes really well. And you can pick one of these up. Sometimes they're like $60. And this is a terrific pen. So I thought this would be a terrific pen, and it's only $12, but there are some really terrific pens that are $4 from China, Jinhao, and the Metropolitan you can sometimes pick up for less than $20. So the Safari, Lamy Safari, which is often in the $20 range. So I thought this would be great. And it is actually disappointing. I would say that it's not just disappointing, it is so unpleasant for me to hold this pen that I think it hurts when I try to write with it. Now, why is that? Well, basically, it has to do with the size of the pen. The pen is quite long. It is actually longer than a Safari pen, and it is longer than the Metropolitan pen, but it is much more narrow, thinner. And you can see that the other thing about it is that it has this shiny metal section that is very narrow. It is less than 1/4 of an inch wide, and in comparison, the Safari is almost 1/2 an inch wide. So it is way too narrow, at least for my big hands, and it is too slippery. Now, what's disappointing about that is that it's actually a nice looking pen. It's all metal pen. It posts really securely. That's nicely. It makes a nice click when it comes together. The actual nib is pretty decent. When I do the writing sample, you'll see that it writes fairly well if I can get my hands around it. But the actual design of the pen is just wrong, it seems to me. Now, it's possible, I guess, if you have small hands and you don't mind the slippery section, that it'll be okay for you. It also might be possible that you could salvage the nib. The nib is really quite nice. It has a little bit of flex to it. It writes fairly smoothly. So that's a good thing. But otherwise, the pen is unusable. The one thing that I managed to do with the pen was I put tape around the section. I put some electrician's tape around it, and that actually made it so that I could sort of write with it. And I don't get that, to tell you the truth. I mean, it's not as if you can't produce a really beautiful pen that is similar to it and that people know is good, like the Metropolitan. How come they have to make this pen so narrow? Were they thinking that maybe for younger people this is more appropriate? And yet this doesn't seem to me, the way it's designed or look, that is meant to appeal to a young person. The name Jazz, which I don't see how this has anything to do with jazz, but it does suggest that it's trying to be hip. And it does look nice. I like the clip that has the kind of clip that looks like a Pelikan, although it's no, it's not bad. It's not bad. The clip is actually quite nice. So if it were a quarter of an inch wider, and it had a section that was the same material as the rest of the body, which is kind of a lacquer black, it would be a pretty decent pen. But as it is now, it is completely unusable, for me at least, because if I put tape around it, I can't get the cap on it. So this is a missed opportunity. It does use international style cartridges or a converter. It has a cartridge in it. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to do a writing sample to show you that it writes okay, although it was painful for me to actually do the writing. And but I'm not going to do a drawing with it because I never would draw with it otherwise. And I say to Pelikan, I love your expensive pens. I also like Pelikan paint. I use they have a wonderful watercolor set that I have used for 30 years, a set like this, just when I'm doing some very casual watercolor pictures. So they do really good job at making paint, and they've been around for 100 years. So it's a fantastic company, but they missed on this one. If you enjoyed this review or found that it was useful, or you disagree, you could write comments, but please subscribe. I'd like to hear from you. And, sometimes they're good fountain pens and sometimes they're bad ones. Here it is, the Pelikan Jazz. It comes with a blue ink cartridge in the pen. And the reason it's so painful is that for my hands, it's so narrow. And then the pen is actually, for the narrowness of the pen is pretty heavy. It weighs around 24 grams when you post it. And but the nib itself is not bad, and it has a little bit of flex for such an expensive pen. That's quite remarkable, and it writes fairly smoothly. It almost has a slight drag to it, but it's not unpleasant. And I actually prefer this nib probably to the standard nib on a Metropolitan. So, I may actually try to take the nib out of the pen. I actually had trouble getting the nib out, but perhaps if I worked at it harder, and maybe transfer it to another pen. So, it does reverse right, but not well.